Family first, my mother said, then quietly cracked my savings account like a kitchen cabinet. Clean, efficient, no trace left behind. After I refused to fund my sister's $50K project, my credit card became a secret pipeline to an unknown shell corporation. The real shock came Monday morning. I walked into my office to find that same corporation was now a preferred vendor for the company where I work. My name is Harper Quinn. I am 32 years old, and I am the head of risk management for Meridian Atlas Logistics. My job is to see the cracks in the system before they become chasms. I analyze data streams, model threats, and build firewalls, both digital and procedural, to protect the company from an ocean of variables. I am, by nature and by trade, a person who closes loops. Tonight, I understand that the biggest unclosed loop wasn't on a server in Frankfurt or a shipping route through the Malacca Strait. It was in my own home. The initial breach notification came at 4:03 a.m. It wasn't a blaring alarm, but a series of sterile, high-priority SMS alerts from my bank, each one a tiny digital pinprick. They vibrated on my nightstand, slicing through the thin veil of a restless sleep. My professional instincts, honed by years of late-night crisis calls, kicked in before my personal shock could. I sat up, the blue light of the phone screen painting my face in a cold, artificial glow. Transaction alert. A payment of $19.99 has been processed to GFE Services, LLC. Transaction alert. A payment of $19.90 has been processed to GFE Services, LLC. Transaction alert. A payment of $9,190 has been processed to GFE Services, LLC. Total, $49,870. The number hung in the air, precise and obscene. It wasn't a random figure. It was $50,000, minus a sliver of plausible deniability. My savings account, the one I had meticulously fed for a decade, down payments, emergency funds, the quiet promise of future security, had been siphoned in 3 clean, sequential withdrawals. My fingers flew across the screen, muscle memory taking over. I logged into my banking portal, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. The user interface, usually a placid landscape of green numbers and positive balances, was now a crime scene. The ledger confirmed it. 3 outgoing ACH transfers, all time-stamped within a 2-minute window, all directed to a beneficiary I had never heard of, GFE Services, LLC. The name was bland, corporate, and utterly alien. It felt like a deliberate insult, a piece of sterile jargon used to mask a deeply personal violation. Panic is an indulgence I cannot afford in my line of work. I suppress it and pivot to analysis. How? The account was fortified with every security measure I had insisted upon: complex passwords, biometric locks, and most importantly, 2-factor authentication. I pulled up the access logs from the bank's security dashboard. There it was, a login at 3:58 a.m. from an unfamiliar IP address, followed by a successful 2FA verification. But my phone, the physical token for that verification, had been right beside me, silent. Then I remembered, around midnight, my cellular service had dropped out for nearly an hour, a dead brick. I'd chalked it up to a network outage, rebooted it, and thought nothing more of it. Now, the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. A SIM swap. Someone had convinced my carrier to port my number to a different device, intercepting the one-time security codes meant only for me. It was a sophisticated, targeted attack. It required inside knowledge. It required knowing who my carrier was, my personal details, my security question answers. The cold stone in my chest began to fracture. I dialed the bank's 24/7 fraud department. The hold music was an insipid piano loop, a maddeningly cheerful soundtrack to my financial evisceration. When a human voice finally came on the line, I was all business. I reported the unauthorized transactions, the time, the amounts, the beneficiary. "I need to know how the authentication was bypassed," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor I felt in my hands. I need to see the full authorization chain. The agent, a man named Marcus, with a tired, methodical voice, put me on another brief hold. The silence stretched. When he returned, his tone was different, cautious. "Ma'am, I see the transactions were authenticated. However, I also see a security profile update made just prior to the transfers. The system notes that the verification for the update was processed through your registered emergency recovery contact." A pause. I held my breath. "Can you confirm," Marcus continued, reading from his script, "that your emergency recovery contact is an individual named Maureen Quinn?" The line went silent, but in my head, a siren was screaming. Maureen Quinn, my mother. The rest of the call was a blur of procedural jargon. I confirmed the fraud, initiated a trace, and requested an immediate freeze on all my accounts. I hung up the phone and sat in the pre-dawn darkness, the name echoing in the quiet of my apartment. It wasn't a hacker in Eastern Europe. It was my mother, the architect of Family First. By the time I walked into the glass and steel lobby of Meridian Atlas Logistics at 7:30 a.m., the shock had crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. I bypassed my office and went straight to the server room, the hum of the climate control a familiar comfort. As head of risk, I had top-tier clearance. I logged into Janus, our proprietary vendor management system. The interface glowed on the monitor, a complex web of contracts, invoices, and compliance certificates. My fingers tapped out the search query, each keystroke a hammer blow. GFESERVICES LLC. The system returned a single result. My blood ran cold. GFE Services LLC wasn't just a random shell company, they were in our system. Vendor ID 8814T. Status preferred. Onboarded. 4 days ago, the authorization field contained a single name, attached to a digital signature time-stamped last Wednesday at 11:17 p.m. Damon Kershaw, Chief Financial Officer. I clicked deeper, pulling the vendor registration file. It contained the articles of incorporation, the tax ID number, and a registered address for service. My eyes scanned the PDF. Landing on the address, it wasn't a corporate office, it was a PEO box in North Wyeth, the small suburban town where I grew up. PEO Box 722. I didn't need to look it up. I knew that address. It was the one my younger sister, Sloane, used for her floundering Etsy shop where she sold watercolor prints of birds. The blur was complete. The line between my family and my company hadn't just been crossed. It had been erased. A single, direct wire had been run from my life savings, through my mother's influence, into my sister's PEO box, and legitimized by my own company's CFO. This wasn't just theft, it was an intricate conspiracy, and I was standing at the epicenter. My hands moved with practiced efficiency. Card locked. Fraud ticket opened. Phrased in the detached language of a corporate incident report. Unauthorized activity detected on personal accounts linked to newly onboarded vendor. Potential for internal collusion and significant financial exposure. Immediate investigation required. Then, I opened my own email client and sent a message to myself. A digital command I couldn't ignore. Subject, GFE, body, Harper, don't go soft. As if on cue. My phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed. Maureen. I stared at it. A wave of nausea washing over me. I silenced the call, letting it go to the digital void of voicemail. A minute later, the notification appeared. A new message. I listened. The speaker pressed hard against my ear. Her voice was not apologetic. It was not panicked. It was the same calm, slightly chiding tone she used when I was a teenager who had forgotten to do a chore. Harper, honey, I'm sure you've seen the alerts. We can talk about this later. Just know that sometimes, what feels like a loss is actually an investment in what matters. You owe this family more than you think. Click. The message ended. Not an explanation, a justification, a bill. I walked back to my desk, the hum of the office now sounding like a low growl. I opened the vendor file for GFE services again. I opened my bank statement. I printed them both. The paper came out of the machine warm, the black ink a stark stain against the sterile white. I took a bright red folder from my supply cabinet, the color we use for high priority, active threat assessments. I slid the documents inside, the bank statement facing the vendor profile, two sides of the same corrupt coin. With a black marker, I wrote on the tab in sharp, angular letters the name of the shell company and the reason for its existence. GFE, Adam's Rib. The red folder on my desk feels heavier than its physical weight. GFE, Adam's Rib. It's a case file, but it's also a biography. Not mine, but the one written for me. The one I'm only now learning to read. My mother's voicemail was a declaration, not an apology. You owe this family. The debt, I'm realizing, was never about money. It was about my function. In our small, suffocating town of North Wyeth, my mother, Maureen, curated our family life like a stage play where the roles were assigned at birth. Sloane was the ingenue, the delicate artist destined for a life of beauty and inspiration. I was the stage manager, the one who ensured the lights stayed on and the set didn't collapse. This wasn't spoken, it was ritualized. If Sloane scraped her knee, she got a kiss, a story, and a scoop of ice cream. If I scraped my knee, I was handed a disinfectant wipe and told, "You have to be more careful. Harper, your sister looks to you to be the strong one." The lesson was clear. Her pain was an event to be soothed. Mine was a liability to be managed. Sloane grew up with a ticket of entitlement, a pass to bypass the mundane struggles of cause and effect. I grew up with a list of duties, while she was encouraged to spend afternoons finding her muse in the woods behind our house. I was at the kitchen table learning to balance the checkbook. My mother called it practical education. It wasn't. It was training. She wasn't teaching me to manage my own future. She was teaching me how to manage the family's present, which always revolved around Sloane's whims. Maureen controlled all the paper, not just the bills and the bank statements, but everything that constituted our official identities. She kept our birth certificates, social security cards, and all our school records in a locked filing cabinet in the den. She said it was for safekeeping, for efficiency. The truth was that information is power, and my mother never willingly ceded an ounce of it. She was the sole administrator of our lives, and we were users with limited permissions. I learned the true cost of this system the spring of my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to a prestigious university 1,000 miles away. Contingent on a significant merit scholarship, I had worked relentlessly for it, sacrificing weekends and sleep for 4 years. The application was flawless. My essays polished, my grades impeccable. All I needed was the financial aid and scholarship paperwork to be submitted by the March 1st deadline. I filled out every line, gathered every document, and gave the sealed, stamped envelope to my mother to mail, just as I always did. The first week of April, a thin envelope arrived, a rejection. The school expressed its regrets. My scholarship application had been received on March 10th, 9 days past the deadline. When I confronted my mother, the stamped envelope still in my trembling hand, she didn't apologize. She put her arms around me, her touch feeling less like comfort and more like a clamp. "Oh, honey," she'd sighed, her voice thick with manufactured sympathy. "Maybe it's for the best. That school is so far away. This way. You can go to the state university. You and Sloane can stay close. A family needs its anchor." I had believed it was a mistake, a tragic, life-altering lapse in her otherwise perfect organizational system. Now, looking at the GFE vendor file, I see it for what it was. The first major sabotage. My success was a threat. My independence was a breach of contract. She wasn't keeping her daughters close. She was keeping her asset closer. Her influence network was something I'd always observed but never fully understood. At the PTA, she wasn't just a member. She was a power broker. She knew which parents owned which local businesses, who sat on which boards. She cultivated relationships with these patrons, as she called them, If a contractor's son needed tutoring, my mother would arrange it with a teacher who owed her a favor. Later, I'd see an invoice for landscaping services from that contractor's company paid out of the PTA's beautification fund, often for work that seemed to be done by school volunteers. She knew how to express gratitude in the form of a paid bill, how to turn social capital into liquid assets. When I was hired at Meridian Atlas, a major logistics firm right out of college, she saw it not as my achievement, but as a new territory to be annexed. She began appearing at the company's charity galas and community outreach events. She'd introduce herself to my superiors, her smile warm, her handshake firm. "I'm Maureen Quinn, Harper's mother. I'm so proud of the work you all do here." She became a familiar, friendly face, the supportive parent of a star employee. I see it now. She wasn't just being supportive. She was casing the joint, mapping the hierarchy, identifying the weak points. She was learning the name and the habits of our CFO, Damon Kershaw. The catalyst for the current crisis came 3 weeks ago. Over a tense Sunday dinner, Sloan, now 28, announced her latest venture. She needed $50,000 for an immersive art project. She was vague on the details, using words like synergy, ephemeral, and community engagement. It was a dream sketched on a cocktail napkin. "I can't just give you $50,000. Sloan," I had said, trying to be gentle but firm. "That's a massive investment. Let's work together. Draft a business plan, create a budget, a list of expenses, a timeline, a revenue projection." Sloan's face crumpled. It was the look she'd perfected since childhood when a requested toy was denied. But it was my mother who answered, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous frequency. "A business plan?" she'd said, placing her fork down with deliberate precision. "Sloan is an artist. Harper, not a bookkeeper. That's your world. She has a dream. You have a career. You should pay for it." The statement was so breathtakingly audacious, so perfectly distilled in its transactional cruelty, that I couldn't respond. I refused. I told them no, not without a plan. The argument was short, brutal, and ended with me leaving before dessert was served. That was the night my cell service died. That was the night my accounts were drained. The fight wasn't the reason for the theft. It was the final trigger. The plan was already in place. My refusal was simply the authorization code she needed to execute it. Staring at the 2 documents in the red folder, my violated bank account and my compromised company, I finally understand. My mother's tenderness has always had its own ledger. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, was an entry on the asset side. Every achievement of mine was a resource to be leveraged. She did not raise a daughter. She cultivated a long-term, high-yield investment, and last night, she decided it was time to cash out. The transition from victim to investigator is a flick of a switch. Emotion is a liability in a threat assessment. It clouds judgment. My personal history is now context, not a driver. The red folder sits on my desk. No longer a symbol of betrayal, but a live case file. The target is a hostile entity named GFE Services. The objective is to map its network, identify its operators, and neutralize the threat to Meridian Atlas. My family is a secondary consideration. First, process. Every system has a protocol. A weakness is not a bug. It is a feature that has been exploited. I open the Meridian Atlas Vendor Onboarding Protocol, a document I helped write, for a new vendor to be granted preferred status, bypassing the standard 90-day probationary period. The process requires 2 independent sign-offs, a formal recommendation from a C-suite executive, and a subsequent due diligence review by the procurement department. I pull the digital paperwork for GFE. Damon Kershaw's signature is on the C-suite recommendation, standard, but the procurement review is thin, almost non-existent. The checklist is marked complete, but the attached notes are generic, boilerplate. Verified corporate standing, no outstanding liens. It's the kind of work an intern does on a Friday afternoon. Procurement's approval was a rubber stamp, likely because the request came from the CFO. Damon leaned on the system, and the system buckled under the weight of his title. The digital signature itself is the first hard piece of evidence. Every action on our network is logged, time-stamped, and geolocated. I extract the metadata from Damon's signature on the GFE approval document. Timestamp: Wednesday, 11/17:33 p.m. IP address: 7221194881. I run the IP through a geolocation service. It doesn't resolve to Damon's home address or any Meridian Atlas office. The result appears on my screen. A single line of text that tightens the knot in my stomach. The Bell Tower Tavern, 4th and Elm Street. A dimly lit bar downtown known for its expensive whiskey and discreet booths. Why is our CFO approving a new high-priority vendor from a tavern at 11 o'clock on a weeknight? The Bell Tower is not a cheap establishment. They invest in security. I place a call to our corporate security chief, a former detective named Mike Corrigan. I don't give him the context, only a request. Mike, I need you to pull the exterior and interior camera footage from the Bell Tower for last Wednesday night. Focus on the hours between 10 p.m. and midnight. It's part of a risk assessment on executive-level protocol compliance. He doesn't ask questions. That's why I trust him. An hour later, a password-protected video file appears in my inbox. I play it. The timestamp in the corner reads 11:12 p.m. There's Damon Kershaw in a high-backed leather booth, his shoulders slumped. He's nursing a glass of amber liquid. Across from him, her face partially obscured by a menu, is a woman. Then she puts the menu down. It's my mother, Maureen Quinn. She is smiling, her hands folded calmly on the table. She slides a document across the table. Damon nods, pulls out his tablet, taps the screen a few times, and then pushes it back. 11:17 p.m. The exact moment GFE Services was born into our system. The camera has no audio, but the transaction is perfectly clear. Now I have the how. Next is the what. What is GFE Services LLC? I run the corporate name through the state's business registry. The filing is recent, less than a month old. The structure is designed for obscurity. The sole registered owner of GFE Services LLC is another company, Goldfinch Endeavors, Inc. It's a classic nested doll structure, meant to frustrate anyone trying to find the ultimate beneficial owner. But they all have to list a registered agent, a physical person responsible for receiving legal notices. The agent for Goldfinch Endeavors is listed as one Arthur Vance, with a corresponding address at a law office in the next county. The name rings a faint bell. I search my mother's old email archives, which I still have access to from years of being her designated IT support. Search term: Arthur Vance. One result: an email from 12 years ago. It's a policy confirmation from her insurance broker. Arthur Vance, the man who handled our family's home and auto insurance for 2 decades. Another node in my mother's network, repurposed for a new, illegal function. The next piece of the puzzle is the invoice GFE sent to Meridian. There was one so far, according to our accounts payable system, a test payment, to ensure the financial pipeline was working before they attempted a larger transfer. The amount? $9,800. The description of services rendered is a single, chilling line: Transportation Compliance Consulting. They are billing my company for my own job description. The sheer arrogance of it is a tactical error. It's a message, a signature. They aren't just stealing, they're mocking me. I download the invoice PDF. It's professionally formatted, but one detail snags my eye. The font used for the company name, GFE Services, is a slightly whimsical sans serif, one I recognize instantly. It's the same font Sloan uses for her Etsy shop branding, and within the body of the invoice, the word compliance is misspelled. COMPLIANCE. It's a small thing, a digital fingerprint left at the scene. Sloan put this together, my mother directed, Damon authorized, and Sloan executed the administrative work. I have enough to act, but it's still circumstantial. Damon's signature from a bar. My mother on camera. A shell company linked to an old family acquaintance. They can spin it. Damon can claim he was pitched a legitimate business. My mother can claim she was just having a friendly drink. The invoice could be a coincidence. I need more. I need irrefutable proof of intent. A smoking gun that cannot be explained away in a boardroom. I need to catch them in the act. So I will build a trap. I open a virtual machine on my secure server, creating a sandboxed environment completely isolated from the main company network. It's a digital cage. Inside this environment, I begin to fabricate a new vendor. I call it Northbridge Audit Solutions. The name is deliberately dull, designed to sound like any other corporate compliance firm. I create a logo, a website, and a series of official-looking documents. The core of the trap is the invoice. I create a new invoice template for Northbridge Audit. Embedded within the PDF is a multi-layered digital watermark. It's invisible to the naked eye, but it contains a tracking beacon. The moment this file is downloaded, opened, or forwarded, it will ping my server, logging the IP address, the device type, and the exact time of the action. It will create a clear, undeniable chain of digital custody. The plan is simple. I will use Damon's complicity against him. I will have Northbridge Audit submit an invoice to Meridian Atlas for a small, plausible amount. $7,500 for Q3 vendor payroll auditing. I will route it through the system in a way that it lands on Damon's desk for approval. Once he approves it, GFE, my mother and Sloan, will see that another consulting firm is getting paid. They are greedy. They will want to know who is encroaching on their territory. They will almost certainly forward the Northbridge invoice to each other to discuss it. When they do, the watermark will activate. I will have a digital map showing the file moving from my company system to their personal devices. It will be proof that transcends plausible deniability. It will be a receipt for their conspiracy. Proof is not enough if it is delivered in a quiet office to a few people who can choose to bury it. This cannot be handled behind closed doors. This needs to be public, a spectacle, a moment where the masks are ripped off in a room full of witnesses, where the option to ignore the truth is removed from the table. I need to build a stage for the final act, and I have one in mind. The quarterly all-hands company meeting, this Thursday. I booked the meeting with Damon Kershaw in Conference Room Frost. It's a glass box on the executive floor, designed to project transparency while offering none. The name is fitting. The air conditioning is always set to a temperature just shy of comfortable, keeping meetings brief and to the point. I requested 15 minutes on his calendar with the subject line, Vendor Protocol Review, vague enough to be harmless, corporate enough to be mandatory. He was already there when I arrived, staring out at the city skyline, a man admiring a kingdom he was helping to plunder. He looked tired, the skin around his eyes puffy. He gestured to the chair opposite him without making eye contact. "Harper," he began, his voice attempting a casual authority it couldn't quite find. "What's this about?" "Procurement handles the day-to-day on vendors." "This is about a specific vendor that bypassed the day-to-day," I said, setting my laptop on the polished table but not opening it. "GFE Services, LLC." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He opened his mouth to speak, but the conference room door slid open. My mother walked in, holding a silk scarf. She feigned a look of surprise, a performance so practiced it was almost believable. "Oh, goodness, I am so sorry," she said, her voice a melody of polite intrusion. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting. Damon, you left this in the car the other night. I wanted to make sure you got it back before it was misplaced." She draped the scarf over the back of an empty chair, a proprietary gesture. It was a perfect piece of theater. She wasn't returning a lost item. She was marking her territory and establishing her presence. She owned this room. She owned him. Damon looked at me, then at my mother, a man caught between two versions of a nightmare. He gave a weak, dismissive wave of his hand. "Maureen, this isn't a good time." "Nonsense," she said, taking a seat beside him, her back straight, her smile unwavering. She looked at me, and the warmth in her eyes was a winter sun, offering no heat. "Harper, you still haven't learned your lesson about family unity." It wasn't a greeting, it was a warning shot. Damon flinched and began fiddling with a high-end fountain pen on the table, clicking it open and closed. A nervous tick, a tell. GFE Services, I repeated. My gaze locked on Damon. It was approved with your signature at 11:17 p.m. last Wednesday from an IP address belonging to the Bell Tower Tavern. The onboarding file was fast-tracked with a cursory review from procurement. The invoice submitted was for Transportation Compliance Consulting. I'd like to understand the business case for this expenditure. Damon. He spun the pen between his fingers, his eyes fixed on its silver clip as if it held the answer. He was a cornered animal, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. It was a provisional partner, a firm with unique insights. Maureen made the introduction. My mother cut in, her voice smooth as glass. Harper, you're making this so unnecessarily dramatic. It was a simple loan. Your sister needed help. You refused. So I found another way. We were always going to pay it back. Pay it back? I asked, letting the question hang in the sterile air. You mean the $49,870 from my personal savings account? Or are you referring to the $9,800 already paid out by Meridian Atlas to your shell corporation? The pen in Damon's hand stopped spinning. My mother's smile didn't falter. She was moving from defense to negotiation. This is a misunderstanding, she said, her tone shifting to one of magnanimous compromise. And it's one we can solve right here. You retract the fraud complaint you filed with your bank this morning. In return, GFE will return every penny, yours and the company's. We'll dissolve the LLC. It will be as if it never existed, a clean slate. She looked at Damon, who nodded eagerly, a drowning man grabbing for a life raft. Yes, he said, finally looking at me. A clean slate, no harm done. No harm done? I leaned forward. You're offering to return the money you stole. That isn't a deal. That's just called not being a thief anymore. My question isn't about the money. What about the process? What about using Meridian's internal systems, leveraging your C-suite authority, Damon, to create a pipeline for laundering funds? That isn't a family matter. That's a corporate crime. Silence. The hum of the HVAC unit filled the void. Damon's face was pale. My mother's mask of serene control finally showed a crack, a flicker of raw anger in her eyes. She had expected me to be emotional, to be hurt. She was not prepared for me to be clinical. This company, she finally spat, her voice low and venomous, owes us. It owes our family. They took everything from your father, and they threw him out like garbage. A 30-year career, gone, because some new vice president wanted to bring in his own people. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father had been laid off from Meridian Atlas 15 years ago. The official reason was corporate restructuring. He was a logistics manager, a lifer. He never fully recovered, sinking into a quiet depression that defined his final years. We never talked about it. My mother had sealed that part of our history away, labeling it a source of shame. Now she was wielding it like a weapon, a justification. His name was Robert Quinn, she said, her eyes boring into me. And the man who signed his termination letter was the CEO before last. He built half their distribution network. This company was built on his back, and they broke it. This isn't theft, Harper. It's a withdrawal. It's collecting on a debt they never planned to pay. So this was it, the root cause, a deep, festering wound of resentment that had poisoned her for over a decade. Sloane's project wasn't the reason. It was the excuse. My savings account wasn't just a source of funds. It was a tool for her long-delayed revenge. And Damon Kershaw, a man I now suspected had his own professional vulnerabilities, was her leverage inside the castle walls. I took a slow breath, processing the new data. The motive was now clear. It made her more predictable, more dangerous. I reached into my bag and placed a small, black USB drive on the center of the table. It made a soft click against the polished surface. "What's that?" my mother asked, her eyes narrowing. "A business plan," I said. "The one I asked Sloane for. It details the formation of a new vendor, the flow of funds, and a complete audit trail. It even has a copy of an invoice with a very interesting digital watermark." Damon's face went white. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He understood the language of metadata, of digital forensics, of evidence that could not be erased. He knew that I had built a trap, and he was staring at the trigger. My mother only saw a piece of plastic, but Damon saw the end of his career. He looked at my mother, a silent, desperate plea in his eyes. He had been played just as surely as I had. I stood up. "Here is my counteroffer," I said, my voice calm and final. "You were right, Mom. This is about family." I let the words sink in, watching the brief flicker of triumph in her eyes before I extinguished it. "And it's about the Meridian family. You have until the all-hands meeting on Thursday to return every cent and issue a full, written confession to the board. Otherwise, this USB drive and its contents become the first exhibit in a criminal investigation." I looked at Damon. "You too. Damon, your confession should probably include your motive for risking everything. I'm sure the board will find it fascinating." For the first time, my mother looked truly rattled. She had underestimated me. She saw me as her emotional daughter, not as the head of risk management. To sell the bluff, I needed to make them believe they still had a choice. "I'll think about your offer," I said, my voice softening slightly. A calculated feint. A clean slate sounds simple. I let them chew on that small morsel of false hope. They needed to believe they could still control the narrative, that they could still negotiate their way out of this. I needed them to stay complacent for the next 48 hours. I turned and walked out of the conference room, the glass door sliding shut behind me. As soon as I was in the hallway, out of their line of sight, I pulled out my phone. I sent a short, encrypted message to the head of our legal department. "Keep the all-company meeting on the schedule for Thursday evening. Add a 20-minute agenda item for me. Title: Internal Systems Integrity Review. The meeting in conference room Frost was not a negotiation. It was a diagnostic. I had confirmed the nature of the infection and identified the primary carriers. Now, I had to trace the pathology. Leaving them with a sliver of false hope was a strategic necessity. People who think they still have a chance to win get sloppy. They take risks. My trap, codenamed Operation Backflow, was designed to exploit that sloppiness. Back in the secure environment of my sandbox, the bait was ready. The fabricated vendor, Northbridge Audit Solutions, was a ghost in the machine, existing only as a string of code and a set of plausible credentials. The invoice for $7,500 was its payload. The digital watermark embedded within it was the detonator. It was a piece of code I designed myself, a whisper-thin tracker that functioned like a die pack in a bank robbery. Once the container was opened improperly, or, in this case, forwarded outside our secure network, it would stain everything and everyone it touched with a permanent, traceable signature. I released the ghost into the system. The Northbridge invoice flowed through the standard channels of accounts payable, a digital slip of paper in a torrent of legitimate transactions. I had routed it specifically to a queue that required senior executive oversight due to its strategic auditing designation, a category I created just for this occasion. It landed, as intended, in Damon Kershaw's approval workflow. For him, it must have been an impossible choice. To deny a routine-looking invoice would raise questions he couldn't answer. To approve it felt like walking deeper into a snare he knew I had set. But my performance in the conference room, the feigned consideration of their clean slate offer, had done its job. He likely concluded that approving it was the path of least resistance, a way to maintain the illusion of normalcy while my mother worked to contain me on the family front. At 2:14 p.m., he clicked approve, a single, desperate keystroke that sealed his fate. The invoice became visible in the paid ledger. Now, I waited. My mother, I knew, would be monitoring the GFE account with obsessive vigilance. She would see that another consulting firm had just been paid by Meridian, a new player at her private feeding trough. Her greed and paranoia would do the rest. At 4:03 p.m., the first alert triggered. A silent notification bloomed on my secondary monitor, the one dedicated to tracking the watermark. Ping 1. The Northbridge invoice PDF had been accessed from outside the Meridian network. The data packet that returned to my server was a digital DNA sample. IP address 98.114.201.2 resolves to a residential address in North Wyeth. Registered to Maureen Quinn. Device, MacBook Pro, 13-inch. Action, file downloaded from Meridian Vendor Portal. Timestamp, 4:02:51 p. She had taken the bait. 30 seconds later, a second alert. Ping 2. IP address, 98.14212.1555. Device, MacBook Pro, 13-inch. Action, file attached to new email draft via Apple Mail client. Timestamp, 4:03:22 p.m. The trap was working perfectly. She wasn't just looking, she was sharing. I watched the logs in real time, my heart a steady, cold drum. The flow of data was a river, and I was watching its course from a satellite. Then, the crucial event, ping 3. IP address, 68.44.101.32. Resolves to a downtown apartment complex. Registered to Sloan Quinn. Device, iPhone 14 Pro. Action, file opened from email attachment. Timestamp, 4:05:11 p.m. I had it, a clean, unbroken chain of digital custody. From the Meridian server to my mother's laptop to my sister's phone, they couldn't claim coincidence. They couldn't claim their accounts were hacked. The watermark proved they were actively sharing the sensitive financial documents of my company between themselves. But the data stream showed something more. The email my mother sent wasn't just to Sloan. There was another recipient on the thread, an address I didn't recognize. Apply at Willow Harbor Arts, com. A quick corporate search revealed Willow Harbor Arts was a recently registered sole proprietorship. The business address was Sloan's apartment. The description was, Community Art Space and Gallery, pending grand opening. This was the final destination. GFE was the collection point, the anonymous shell that received the corporate funds. But Willow Harbor Arts was the wash. It was the legitimate business Sloan would use to spend the money, framing it as funding for her dream. The $50,000 wasn't for a vague project. It was for a brick-and-mortar gallery, a permanent monument to their fraud. At 5:30 p.m., as if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer, a payment of $1,200 from her account to mine. The message followed a second later. See, honey? We're already starting to make it right. Just a misunderstanding. Call off the dogs, and we can fix this as a family. It was a masterful piece of manipulation, a pittance offered as a gesture of goodwill, designed to make me pause, to make me reconsider my position. She was trying to establish a record of cooperation while simultaneously conspiring with Sloan over the watermarked invoice. She was closing one valve while opening another, unaware that I was the one controlling the entire plumbing system. That was all I needed. The evidence was complete, compiled, and irrefutable. I stood up and walked out of my office, heading directly for the procurement department on the 4th floor. The head of procurement, a meticulous man named Kenji Tanaka, looked up as I approached his desk. I kept my voice level, formal, the voice of risk management. Kenji, I'm officially flagging a high-priority vendor for a full compliance review, vendor ID 8814T, GFE Services. He frowned, tapping a few keys on his keyboard. GFE? I remember that one. Damon fast-tracked it last week. Said they were a key strategic partner for a new logistics initiative. I am invoking Section 4, Subsection B of the Internal Anti-Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Policy, I continued, ignoring his comment. It requires an immediate temporary suspension of all payment capabilities for the vendor account, pending an investigation into potential conflicts of interest and billing irregularities. Kenji's face went pale. Invoking Section 4B was the corporate equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. It was a protocol I had helped design, reserved for situations with a high probability of significant financial or legal exposure. Suspend payments? He stammered. On a vendor the CFO personally vouched for? Harper, are you sure? Damon will be furious. My authority in matters of risk supersedes executive preference when a credible threat is identified, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. The system is locking them out as we speak. Please compile your department's full diligence file on their onboarding. I want to see every email, every form, every note you have. I'll need it by morning. I turned and walked away, leaving him staring at his screen in stunned silence. The first valve was now closed. GFE's access to Meridian's accounts was severed. Damon Kershaw was now trapped. He was wedged between the undeniable evidence on my USB drive and a newly launched, high-profile internal investigation that he could no longer control. The small fire I had started was now a corporate inferno, and his name was on the accelerant. The all-hands meeting on Thursday was no longer a threat I was holding over their heads. It was a deadline, the final stop for a train that had already left the station. Operation Backflow was complete. All the poisoned water was now flowing back to its source. All I had to do was wait for the pressure to build. The call came on Tuesday evening. The name on the screen was Sloan, and for a moment, the professional shell I had built around myself threatened to crack. For a split second, I was just a big sister again. Then I remembered the red folder, the watermarked invoice, and the cold, hard number, $49,870. I let it ring twice more before answering, my voice intentionally flat. Hello? Sloan? Harper? Oh, thank God. Her voice was thin and reedy, stretched taut with a panic that sounded genuine. You have to stop this. You have to call it off. Mom told me what you're doing at your company. What I'm doing, I said, keeping my tone clipped and precise, is my job. It's called risk management. No, it's not what you think, she stammered, the words tumbling over each other. It was just a loan, a temporary thing. I was just borrowing the money. Mom said we'd pay it all back as soon as the studio was up and running. She promised. The script was my mother's, but the delivery was all Sloan. It was the same desperate plea she used as a child when she'd broken a vase and tried to blame the dog. I remained silent, a tactic that I knew unnerved her more than shouting would. Silence demands to be filled. I'll show you, she said, her voice brightening with a forced, fragile optimism. A second later, my phone buzzed with an incoming picture message. I opened it. The photo showed a large, empty room with dusty wooden floors and a single, grime-streaked window. It was a blank space, devoid of life or potential. It looked less like the birthplace of a dream and more like a place where dreams went to die. A text followed the image. See? The lease is signed. This is it. Willow Harbor Arts. The name hit me. Willow Harbor Arts, the final destination for the laundered money. The name from the email header on the watermarked invoice. That's an impressive space. Sloan, I said, my voice dangerously calm. But my question isn't about the real estate. My question is about the invoice from GFE Services that Meridian Atlas paid. It was for transportation compliance consulting. Can you explain to me how corporate compliance consulting for a logistics company translates into a downtown art studio? The line went quiet. I could hear her faint, shallow breathing. I don't know, she finally whispered. Mom handled the paperwork. She just told me what to name the company and where to sign. A beat of silence, and then the line that broke everything open. I don't even know what compliance means, Harper. And there it was, the entire strategy laid bare. Sloan wasn't the mastermind. She wasn't even a willing accomplice in the truest sense. She was the human shield, the soft, artistically inclined, financially illiterate facade they put up to hide the ugly mechanics of the crime. She was the why, the sympathetic, dreamy-eyed justification for the theft. My mother was the how. She was the one behind the wheel, her hands gripping it tight, with Sloane's foot pressed down on the accelerator. Before I could respond, A different voice cut into the call, sharper and more commanding. "That's enough. Sloan!" My mother. She must have been listening in the entire time. "Harper, listen to me. You are on the verge of making a catastrophic mistake. You are going to burn down your own family to protect a corporation that would replace you in a week." "This isn't about the corporation," I said, my voice hardening. "This is about you forging my identity, draining my life savings, and using my career as a cover for your crimes." "Language, Harper? Such ugly words," she chided, her tone maddeningly condescending. "This was about giving your sister a chance, something you were too selfish to do. Don't you dare destroy her future over a few numbers on a spreadsheet. She is your blood." The pattern, once a confusing mess of childhood hurts and adult obligations, was now a crystal-clear schematic on a blueprint. Step 1. Create a ghost vendor, GFE, using a complicit corporate officer. Step 2. Siphon funds from the company under the guise of legitimate services. Step 3. If personal funds are needed to bridge a gap or accelerate the plan, take them from the designated family asset, me. Step 4. Funnel all proceeds into a legitimate front, Willow Harbor Arts, controlled by the blameless, naive artist. It was a closed loop, a self-sustaining ecosystem of fraud, and I had been designated as its emergency power supply. "Put Sloan back on the phone," I demanded. "She has nothing more to say." "Put her on the phone, Mom, now." There was a muffled sound, a rustling, and then Sloan's timid voice returned. "I'm here." "The meeting is Thursday." "Sloan," I said, lowering my voice, "there will be a presentation. Evidence will be shown. People will be asking questions. Your name is on the paperwork for Willow Harbor Arts. You are a part of this." "I can't," she whispered, and the sound was so full of terror that it almost broke through my resolve. "Harper, please, if I tell the truth at that meeting, if I say what she made me do, Mom will cut me off. For good. You know she will. I'll have nothing. I'll be completely alone." The plea landed like a physical weight in my chest. For a moment, all I wanted to do was drop everything, drive to her apartment, and hold her. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that I would protect her, that we could figure it out together, just the two of us. The muscle memory of being the big sister, the protector, screamed at me to close the red folder and run to her. But my hand wasn't free. It was resting on that file. And behind that file wasn't just my own violated trust and stolen money. It was the entire ethical framework of my career. It was the trust of the company that I was paid to protect. It was Kenji in procurement, Mike in security, and hundreds of other employees who relied on the system I was in charge of safeguarding. Sloan was asking me to save her from our mother, but the price was to become just like her, someone who bends the rules and sacrifices integrity for the sake of family. I could feel the two halves of my life pulling me apart, the sister and the risk manager, the past and the future. "I love you, Sloan," I said, and my voice was thick with an emotion I had suppressed for days. "But you are not the only person who is going to be alone if this goes wrong." I made the decision in that instant. The choice was brutal, but it was clear. You cannot heal a wound by pretending it isn't there. You cannot fix a broken system by making a single, sentimental exception. The only way out was through. The only way to save my sister from our mother's control in the long run was to expose the entire rotten structure to the light. "Truth first, Sloan," I said, my voice gaining its strength back. "Then we can talk about hugs." I ended the call before she could reply, before my mother could snatch the phone back and fire another volley of guilt and manipulation. The connection was cut. The signal was lost. I stood in the quiet of my apartment, the red folder on the table feeling like a shield. My duty was clear. The embrace would have to wait. The Black Alder Auditorium is where corporate narratives are born and buried. It's a theater of soft lighting, excellent acoustics, and tiered seating designed to make every employee, from the mailroom clerk to the regional VPs, feel like a part of a unified whole. Tonight, the air is thick with the usual pre-meeting buzz. 200 employees are in their seats, A small camera icon in the corner of the two massive screens on either side of the stage indicates the internal live stream is active, piping this feed to our satellite offices across the country. Everyone is watching. When my name is called, I walk to the podium with a steady, measured pace. I am not here as Harper Quinn, the daughter. I am here as the head of risk management. I place my laptop on the lectern, connect it to the projector, and look out at the sea of familiar faces. In the third row, I see her, my mother. She is seated next to Damon Kershaw. She looks perfectly composed, her hands folded in her lap, a mask of maternal concern etched on her face. She looks like a parent attending a school play. Damon, by contrast, is a portrait of barely contained panic. A thin sheen of sweat glistens on his forehead under the stage lights. My first slide clicks onto the screens. It is stark, brutal, and simple. It is a flowchart. "Good evening," I begin, my voice amplified, clear and devoid of emotion. "My name is Harper Quinn. My agenda item is Internal Systems Integrity Review. What I am about to present is a case study of a critical systems failure, from detection to containment." I click the remote. The flowchart animates. A box labeled Harper Quinn Personal Savings appears on the left. An arrow flows from it to a second box, GFE Services LLC. From there, another arrow connects to a third box, Willow Harbor Arts. A final, thick red arrow points from that box to a simple icon of a wallet, labeled Personal Use. "The breach began with an external event," I state, my voice echoing slightly in the silent hall. "The unauthorized transfer of nearly $50,000 from a private citizen's account. The beneficiary was an entity named GFE Services." I glance at my mother. Her expression doesn't change, but her hands tighten in her lap. Normally, a personal matter like this would have no bearing on Meridian Atlas. However, a concurrent internal audit revealed that GFE Services was also a newly onboarded preferred vendor in our own system. A low murmur ripples through the audience. People are shifting in their seats, leaning forward. The vendor was fast-tracked for approval by our CFO, Damon Kershaw. I don't look at him, but I can feel the heat of 200 pairs of eyes turning toward the third row. The digital signature that authorized this vendor was executed at 11:17 p.m. last Wednesday. The metadata from that signature provides a clear geolocation. The slide changes. A map of downtown appears. A single red pin dropped on a building. Next to it, a high-resolution security still. The IP address belongs to the Bell Tower Tavern. This is security footage from the tavern, time-stamped at 11:12 p.m. on the same night. I let the video play. The silent, grainy footage fills the giant screens. Damon, looking disheveled. My mother, looking poised and in command. A document sliding across the table. Damon tapping on his tablet. The audience lets out a collective, soft gasp. It is undeniable. The collusion is right there, in black and white. "The approval of GFE," I continue, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, "was based on a personal introduction, bypassing standard due diligence protocols. The first invoice paid by this company to GFE was for $9,800 for services described as Transportation Compliance Consulting." I click to the next slide. It shows the Northbridge audit invoice. To test the integrity of the payment system, my department created a baited invoice from a ghost company. This invoice contained a multi-layered digital watermark designed to track its movement. Within 2 hours of its approval, the watermark began to report. The slide animates. A line traces a path from a Meridian server icon to a laptop icon labeled with my mother's IP address. A second line branches from there to an iPhone icon, labeled with Sloan's IP address. The path is clear, simple, and utterly damning. The room is now completely silent. The only sound is the hum of the projector. The document was illegally shared outside our secure network between the principals of GFE Services and its parent company, Willow Harbor Arts. This constitutes a severe breach of corporate data security and demonstrates a clear intent to defraud. I take a breath. As of 5 p.m. yesterday, acting under the authority of the anti-fraud policy, my department has placed a temporary freeze on the GFE vendor account. I am formally recommending to the board that they commission a fully independent, external audit of the entire vendor onboarding process for the last fiscal quarter. Damon lurches to his feet. His face is flushed, his voice cracking with desperation. This is a gross misuse of a company forum. This is a private family dispute. This involves personal information. Mr. Kershaw, please sit down. The voice comes from the front row. It is Alana Petrova, our general counsel. She hasn't turned around, but her voice cuts through the auditorium like a razor. Ms. Quinn is the head of risk management. She is reporting on a risk. Please continue. Harper. Damon collapses back into his seat as if his strings have been cut. The power in the room has now fully shifted. It is no longer a family drama. It is a corporate tribunal, and I am the prosecution. And then, a new sound, a soft sob. From the back of the auditorium, a figure rises. It's Sloane. She is trembling, her face pale and streaked with tears. All eyes turn to her. It's my fault, she whispers, her voice shaking but carried by the room's perfect acoustics. She takes a stumbling step into the aisle. But I didn't know. I didn't understand. Her eyes find mine across the crowded room, a desperate, pleading look. My mother told me to sign the papers. She said it was a grant application for my studio, a legal arts sponsorship. I didn't know what compliance meant. I thought it was legal. The room erupts in hushed, frantic whispers. The human shield has just turned and testified against its commander. I look back to the third row. The mask is gone. My mother's face has crumpled, not in sadness, but in pure, unadulterated rage. She glares at Sloane, a look of ultimate betrayal. Then she stands, her voice breaking for the first time, not with weakness, but with a raw, ragged fury. Everything I did, she shouts, her voice cracking, was for this family, for my children. The justification hangs in the air, a final, pathetic defense. I look at her, not with hatred, but with a strange, cold pity. I click to my final slide. It is a single sentence, in large, black letters. I turn from the screen and look directly at my mother. My voice steady, final, and loud enough for everyone in the room and on the live stream to hear. Family is not an ATM. I pause, letting the words land. Then I turn my gaze to the rest of the silent, watching employees. And neither is this company. My final statement hangs in the auditorium, an indictment that needs no further explanation. The silence that follows is not empty. It is heavy, dense with judgment. For a moment, the entire room is a frozen tableau. Then, the gears of the corporate machine begin to turn, swiftly and without sentiment. Alana Petrova, the general counsel, stands. She doesn't look at me or my family. She addresses the room, and by extension, the entire company watching on the live stream. In light of the evidence presented by the head of risk management, she announces, her voice a blade cutting through the tension, I am invoking Article 7 of the corporate bylaws. Effective immediately, an emergency committee of the board is convened. Based on the irrefutable documentation of protocol breach, misuse of executive authority, and conspiracy to defraud the company, this committee has voted unanimously. Damon Kershaw is suspended from his duties as Chief Financial Officer, pending the outcome of a full external investigation. His access to all company systems is revoked, effective now. In the third row, Damon slumps in his chair as if a physical support has been kicked out from under him. He is no longer a C-suite executive. He is just a man in an expensive suit, waiting to be escorted from the building. Alana continues, her gaze sweeping over the audience. This committee has also voted to turn over the full contents of Ms. Quinn's investigation to the appropriate regulatory and law enforcement agencies. The corporate verdict is delivered. Clean, final, now, for the family. I turn my attention from the stage and look directly at the back of the room, where my sister is still standing, a lone, trembling figure in the aisle. I soften my voice, but I make sure it is still loud enough for the microphone to catch. This next part needs to be witnessed. "Sloan," I say, and her tear-streaked face snaps toward me. "You have a choice. What you did was wrong. You allowed your name and your business to be used as a front to launder stolen money. But I believe you when you say you didn't understand the full scope of the crime." I give her a path out, a narrative she can cling to. Therefore, Meridian Atlas is prepared to offer you a resolution. It has 3 parts. 1. The full and immediate return of any and all funds funneled into the Willow Harbor Arts account. 2. A signed, legally binding confession detailing your role in this scheme and affirming that you acted under the direction of others. 3. Your full cooperation with the external auditors. I pause, letting the terms sink in. If you agree to these 3 conditions, the company will not pursue a civil lawsuit against you for your part in this. It's a lifeline, thrown in the middle of a hurricane. It is also a wedge, driving a final, impassable divide between her and our mother. Sloan looks from me to my mother, who is staring at her with eyes of ice. In that single, silent exchange, Sloan sees her future, a future of continued manipulation and control, or a future of painful, terrifying freedom. She takes a shuddering breath, her entire body trembling, and nods. "Yes," she whispers. "Okay, I'll do it." Alana Petrova, ever prepared, gestures to a junior counsel near the back, who approaches Sloan with a tablet and a stylus. It's an affidavit, pre-drafted based on the evidence I had already shared with legal. It outlines her role as the proprietor of Willow Harbor Arts and states she acted under the direction of Maureen Quinn. Sobbing, Sloan scribbles her name at the bottom. The signature is shaky, a testament to her broken state, but it is legally binding. The first stitch is in place. With Sloan's defection complete, only one loose end remains. I turn my gaze to the 3rd row, to my mother. "And you, Mom?" I ask, my voice stripped of its previous softness. "What's your choice?" She rises to her feet, not with the defeated slump of Damon, but with a renewed, defiant energy. The mask of the victim is gone, replaced by the hard, unyielding face of a matriarch who has been defied. She looks at me, at Sloan, at the entire room, with pure contempt. "Choice?" she scoffs, her voice ringing with indignation. "You stand there in your suit, in this glass tower, and you dare to talk to me about choices? Without me, neither of you would be here today. Without the sacrifices I made, the PTA favors I called in, the bills I juggled, the paths I cleared for you, you would be nothing." It's her final performance, the self-sacrificing mother, the martyr who was forced into desperate measures by the thanklessness of her children and the cruelty of the world. "You're right," I say, and a flicker of surprise crosses her face. "You did make sacrifices." I turn back to my laptop at the podium. "You sacrificed my future for your convenience. You sacrificed my sister's innocence for your revenge." I click the remote one last time. The screen behind me changes. It's no longer a flowchart or a video still. It is a screenshot of an email, dated 14 years ago. When I was 18 and about to leave for the state university, she had trapped me into attending. The sender is Maureen Quinn. The recipient is Harper Quinn. The subject line is, "Please don't go." The body of the email is short. The entire auditorium reads it in a collective silent breath. "Harper, I know you're excited to move into the dorms, but I need you to reconsider. I need you to stay home for 1 more year. Things are tighter than you know. Don't leave, honey. I need your credit card to help us get through." If the video from the tavern was a crack in her facade, this email is a demolition, the mask of the selfless provider, the woman who did everything for her family, shatters into 1,000,000 pieces. The truth is laid bare for 200 people to see. She didn't see a daughter preparing for a future. She saw a financial instrument, an asset to be leveraged. The auditorium is so quiet, I can hear the air moving through the vents. My mother stands frozen, exposed under the harsh glare of the stage lights and her own damning words. The silence is broken by a strangled gasp. She turns, her face a mask of fury, and tries to walk away, to flee the stage of her own public execution. She doesn't get far. Two members of corporate security, a man and a woman in discreet dark suits, step into the aisle, blocking her path. They are polite but firm. "Ma'am," the man says, his voice low but clear, "we're going to have to ask you to wait. The police have been notified and would like to speak with you." Her last escape road is closed. She is trapped. I look away from her, my gaze finding Sloane, who is now being quietly guided to a seat in the back by the junior counsel. She looks small, broken, and utterly lost. I step away from the podium, the presentation over, the verdict delivered. I walk to the edge of the stage and look down at her. "Sloane," I say, my voice now quiet, meant only for her. "You're coming home with me tonight." She looks up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a fragile, dawning relief. "There are no more secret accounts," I add, making a promise that is also a new law. "Not anymore." The auditorium doors at the back of the hall swing shut as the security team begins to clear the room, the sound echoing with the finality of a gavel strike. A period at the end of a long and painful sentence. The aftermath is not an explosion. It is a series of quiet, deliberate clicks. It is the sound of systems being shut down, rerouted, and rebooted under a new protocol. The drama is over. The cleanup has begun. Before the last employee has even left the Black Alder Auditorium, the first official communication is deployed, an internal memo, drafted by legal and authorized by the interim CEO, propagates through the company's email server. The subject line is sterile. Urgent. Procedural update regarding vendor management. The body is concise, a masterclass in corporate crisis communication. It announces the temporary restructuring of the vendor onboarding process. It informs everyone that a mandatory 90-day top-to-bottom external audit of all Tier 1 suppliers has been commissioned. It mentions Damon Kershaw's immediate leave of absence. It makes no mention of GFE, my mother, or the raw public vivisection that just occurred. It doesn't need to. The message between the lines is perfectly clear. The vulnerability has been found, and the system is being hardened. My work is not done on the stage. It continues in the quiet aftermath. The next morning, I am not at Meridian, but at my bank. I sit across from a branch manager, a man who looks profoundly uncomfortable, as if he's mediating a hostile divorce. I sign the papers. Form 7B, revocation of authorized user status. Form 11C, removal of emergency contact and power of attorney. I am systematically dismantling the architecture of access my mother spent decades building. Each signature is a keystroke deleting a backdoor she had installed into my life. The manager informs me that their fraud department has managed to claw back a significant portion of the funds from GFE's holding account before it could be fully transferred. Not all of it, but most. The remainder. The amount that slipped through the cracks. I write off in my own internal ledger. Not as a loss, but as a tuition payment for the most expensive, most valuable education of my life. Sloane moves into my apartment that weekend. There is no grand, emotional reunion. It is a quiet, awkward process. She arrives with 2 suitcases and a box of art supplies, her face pale and her eyes perpetually downcast. She is a refugee from a civil war I had to declare. I don't offer platitudes or easy forgiveness. I offer structure. I give her the spare bedroom, a key, and a set of rules. On Monday, she doesn't go to a mythical art studio. She takes the bus to the Meridian Atlas corporate campus. Through HR, I arranged an entry-level position for her. She is a document processing assistant in the legal records department. It is a temporary, hourly contract job. She will spend her days scanning and digitizing old shipping manifests in a windowless basement room. It is monotonous, anonymous, and completely legitimate work. It is a way to pay back her debt, not just to the company, but to the very concept of earning a living. It is starting at zero. My own personal systems require a full purge. I go to my mobile carrier and report the fraudulent SIM swap. They are apologetic, offering credits I don't want. I don't want their apologies. I want a complete firewall. I get a new phone number, a new SIM card. I spend an hour meticulously updating my contact information on every account, every service, every utility. With each change, I feel a digital chain link breaking. The final step is logging into my mother's online accounts, the ones I set up for her years ago, and surgically removing my name from every field. I am no longer her emergency contact. I am no longer the recovery email for her forgotten passwords. I am no longer her tech support. I am a ghost in her machine now. That evening, long after the maintenance crews have cleaned the auditorium, I go back. The room is empty, dark, and silent. The energy from the meeting still hangs in the air. A faint, electric hum of change. I walk to the podium. The system is still logged in under my name. I look at the vast, empty space and feel the weight of what happened here. This is where I broke my family to save it, where the illusion of our unity was sacrificed for the possibility of an honest future. One by one, I power down the systems, the microphones, the projector, the live stream feed, the stage lights. With each click, the room grows darker, quieter. Back in my office, the red folder sits on my desk. GFE, Adam's Rib. It is a complete file, a perfect record of a crime, from inception to resolution. I take a roll of evidence tape from my desk drawer. I wrap it around the folder, sealing it shut. Then I take a black marker and write today's date on the seal, and a single word. Closed. The case is over. The threat has been contained. I pick up my phone and send a short message to the members of my risk management team. They have been waiting for my signal. The external audit team arrives at 0800 tomorrow. Give them everything. No rollbacks on the new protocols. The message is clear. There is no going back to the way things were. The old system is dead. Later that night, as I'm getting ready for bed, my phone buzzes with a message from Sloan. It's not a text full of apologies or excuses. It is a picture, a simple pencil sketch on a piece of copy paper, likely taken from her new office. It's a drawing of her hand, holding a single key. The detail is rough, the shading incomplete, but there is a sense of focus in the lines, an honesty that her grandiose paintings never had. It is the first piece of art I have ever seen her create that was not funded by a lie. I look at the drawing for a long time. The hand, the key, the blank paper. A new beginning. I type my reply, the words coming to me with a clarity that feels both cold and kind. Starting at 0 is the safest number. The word forgiveness is never spoken. It is a currency I do not trade in, a concept that has no place in a risk assessment. My mother's name will be spoken, of course, but it will be by prosecutors and defense attorneys, in the sterile, dispassionate language of the law. They will discuss indictments, arraignments, and plea bargains. They will define her actions in legal terms: wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy. They will assign it a case number. That is their system. It is a process, and I trust in the process. My own involvement is now limited to that of a witness, a provider of evidence. I have submitted my statement, a document as cold and factual as a server log. The emotional verdict was rendered in the Black Alder Auditorium. The legal one is a formality. My own debriefing is private, internal. I update my personal operating manual, the set of protocols I live by. A new rule is codified, written in the indelible ink of experience and etched into the core of my professional and personal philosophy. It is Rule 47. Trust must be audited. It applies to vendors, to executives, and to anyone who uses the word family as a key. Trust is not a static state. It is a dynamic system that requires regular, rigorous verification. Love is not a valid security credential on its own. The physical world is reconfigured to align with the new protocol. At home, I changed the combination on the small safe where I keep my important documents. The old code was based on a family birthday. The new one is a random string of alphanumeric characters, a password generated by an algorithm, devoid of sentiment. The habit of my heart is also reconfigured. The reflexive urge to open up at the phrase, "because we're family," is now met with a cool, clinical firewall. The vulnerability has been patched. The exploit is no longer effective. There is no tearful phone call. There is no dramatic prison visit. I do not open a thread for a future reconciliation. It is not necessary. The connection wasn't a healthy bond. It was an unsecured network port, and I have permanently closed it. To try and reconnect would be to willingly reintroduce a known security threat into my system. It is an unacceptable risk. At work, the changes are systemic. The 90-day audit proceeds with ruthless efficiency. I draft a new addendum to the vendor onboarding protocol. It is now known informally as the Kershaw Rule. It mandates that any vendor personally introduced or recommended by an executive-level employee must undergo an enhanced, independent due diligence process, conducted by a third-party firm. No exceptions. It adds a layer of mandatory, impartial verification, a corporate version of my new personal rule. I send the draft to Alana Petrova. She approves it within the hour. The system is now stronger than it was before. The breach has led to a permanent upgrade. At home, in my apartment that now feels entirely my own, I begin to remove the last ghosts of the old system. An old, framed photograph from a family vacation 10 years ago comes off the living room wall. It has been there for so long I had stopped seeing it. When I lift it from the hook, it leaves behind a faint, perfect rectangle on the pale gray paint, a slightly lighter shade, untouched by the years of sunlight that have faded the rest of the wall. It is an outline of something that is no longer there. A ghost image, a scar. I don't patch the paint. I leave it. I take out my phone and I take a picture of this faint, pale rectangle. It is proof that something was there, and that it is gone now. It is proof of the removal. It is proof of survival. I save the image to my secure cloud storage, in a folder protected by two-factor authentication. I name the file, Proof of Life. There are no more invisible pipelines running through me, no more emotional debts being called due, no more unwritten clauses in the family contract that allow others to make withdrawals from my life. The flow of unearned obligation has been stopped at the source. The valve is closed, locked, and the handle has been melted down. I am still Harper Quinn. My job is to manage risk, to find the weak points in a system, and to shut them down when they become a threat. I am good at my job. And tonight, sitting in the quiet of my secure, audited apartment, I shut down one final system, the oldest one of all. I revoke, permanently and irrevocably, the access rights of others to my life, to my future, and to my wallet. The account is now, and will forever be, single signature only. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from today. I'd love to see how far this story has traveled and hear your thoughts. If this resonated with you, please consider subscribing and liking the video. And if you really want to support the channel, hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.